Broadcasting live from Youngville, North Carolina and Ontario, Canada, this is Got Mead Live, a weekly show where Vicky Rowe and AJ Airmans bring you the mead news, meadery info, and mead-making discussions from all over, talking with mead makers, mead owners, industry mavens, and influencers. This is Got Mead Live, a weekly podcast about mead and the people who love it and where the mead world is going. And now here are your hosts, Got Mead owner Vicky Rowe and mead and wine maker AJ Airmans.
While Hamish is cursing live from the den of the puppies of the apocalypse, a bunny pen in Ottawa, Canada, Melbourne Down Under, and Ryan's Pad in Denver, welcome to Got Mead Live. We are without Manny tonight because Manny is producing a new show on television down there in Miami, and it was a huge hit. So he's been buried, and we're hoping to maybe see him possibly later tonight or next week. But in the meantime, it's just me, Hamish, AJ, and Ryan. So we're all here. We've got a great show tonight. We've got Evan Himes from Dutch Gold Honey. He gave a talk on varietal honeys in traditional meads at the AMMA Conference. And it was really good. And the meads that he served there for tasting, Sergio from Melavino made them from the various varietals that Dutch Gold provided to them. So Ryan's going to talk to us about their varietals and some of the stuff they're doing. And we've sucked Ryan's already in the crowd. We've sucked Evan into the crowd, and he's making mead. So he can join us on the dark side. It'll be fun. Of course, we do all this on our own time and for free because, we're just that awesome and stuff. But the software, hardware, and storage costs money every month. So we hope you'll consider becoming a supporting patron member. It's only $30 a year, and you get access to GotMead.com's patron forums. You get access to the Facebook patron group. 50 cents a week, guys. Get you access to all of that. And, of course, you're helping to support the show and Got Mead and everything that it does for mead outreach, if you will. So we really appreciate it. I really thank you very much for the folks that signed up over the last week. You are much appreciated. Know that. You can listen to us live on the Got Mead website. Just go to gotmead.com and click on Got Mead Live Radio Show, and the player's right there. Or if you prefer and want to listen to us later, you can download us from iTunes, SoundCloud, TuneIn, and Stitcher Radio. Just search Got Mead Live. It'll pop right up. We got replays all the way back to the beginning of the show. So, go ahead and get those. Get caught up. Of course, you can find us online at gotmead.com. Facebook, we are at facebook.com/gotmead for the page and facebook.com/groups/gotmead for our mead-making group. We also have a group for Got Mead International Brewmasters, which is our digital brew club. So we're trying to get that thing moving forward. We got a bunch of people in there. We're going to start doing some stuff in there and hopefully putting together some activities that will help people learn to make better mead. On Twitter, you can find us at GotMeadNow. Feel free to tweet us. I'm usually watching during the show and can transfer any questions over to whoever our guests are. And, of course, if you want to send us questions, just put your mouse over Got Mead Live Radio Show on the website at gotmead.com. You'll see a drop-down that says Send Us Questions, and then you can just send us stuff and we'll ask it on the show. Blah. So, the lady that's helping me to learn to control my breath so that I don't constantly feel like I'm suffocating, has been telling me, she's like, dude, you need to talk a lot less. Yeah, what? That's good luck with that. That's gonna happen, right? Anybody who knows me is probably laughing their ass off right now. So what are you drinking, AJ?
I'm actually, I got a little creative today, and I've got some of the Hawk Knob Sizer that I opened a couple weeks ago, and I discovered last weekend that mixing it with tonic water makes both of them awesome. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Maybe the sweetness from the tonic water, because it is actually sweeter than Coke, despite its bitterness. I think the sweetness comes out when you cut the bitterness by mixing it with something else. And so even though I'm mixing it with something that's less sweet, the whole thing tastes sweeter, and it's actually really pleasant. I'm quite enjoying this.
Nice.
And it's just one of those things of, if you got a mead that's a little bit too something. Like this one I found a little bit on the dry side. Try mixing it with something, tonic water, ginger ale, club soda.
Mead.
Just, see what happens if you dilute it a little bit. See what happens if you sweeten it a little bit. Just try stuff.
Yeah, don't be afraid to mess. That's, you get some of your
Yeah,
best...
mix shit. I mean, totally. What have you got to lose?
Yeah.
Try stuff.
I've gotten some of my best stuff from just playing around with mixtures and going, well, this is a little too dry and this one here is a little too sweet, and mix it. Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah,
I did that with a couple of Joe's Ancient Orange batches that I made. One that was I was messing with the recipe like you're not supposed to, and one was a little too dry and the other was a little too sweet, so I mixed them together and it came out just right. So,
cool.
Some stuff.
Yeah, it is. Ryan, what about you? What you drinking? Ryan?
Well, actually, I'm eating. I went for a bicycle ride this afternoon. We had great weather today, and
Nice.
as soon as I got home, I was talking to Peter on the phone for a little bit and just hung up long enough to make a bit of dinner, and so I had my phone on mute while I'm sitting here munching away, and I haven't got to the part of drinking yet. So, but when I go there, I'll probably be drinking. I don't know. I've got a rye barrel full of trad that I put in there a little while back. I'll probably go dip into that and see how it's coming along.
That sounds interesting. I like the sound of that. You'll have to let us know what it comes out as.
Yeah, I'll bring you some next time I see you.
Thank you. I'm hoping to get back out that way. I'd like to get back out that way when I'm not staying busy. I don't get to do anything.
Right.
Every time I come out there, I never even get out of the flipping hotel, and it's like, come on, it's so gorgeous here. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I need to just hop on a plane and just call somebody and say I need a couch to surf and just go.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe I'll do that this fall. That'll be nice. I like Colorado in the fall. Okay, so I've got Last Harvest Sizer from Brimminghorn, and I got a lot of mead when I was at John's place when I went up to New York to visit with Bobby, and I came home with like a case and a half. It was crazy, but he was nice enough to sell me some of his draft stuff that normally you have to like come in. So I've got these great 3/4 liter flip top bottles with Brimminghorn engraved on them. It's really cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the logo is awesome to begin with, but it looks awesome on
yeah.
these bottles. But yeah, so this was one of their draft sizers, and he calls it Last Harvest Sizer, and it's just a straight up sizer, carbonated. It's got a lot of sort of almost a Granny Smith apple kind of thing going on in the nose. And the honey's there too, but the apple is prominent. And then it's really, when you drink it, it's really crisp and just a little tart. So again, you get that sort of that kind of Granny Smith thing going on. And it's got the honey undertones to it. So there's just tons of apple flavor with just enough honey underneath it to just kind of make it fly. And it would be so awesome with a nice sharp cheese. I'm kind of wishing that I'd grabbed a couple whacks of cheese out of the fridge before I came in here. But yeah, it's I like it, and I cannot wait to be able to reuse this bottle because it's a really nice bottle.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hamish, what are you drinking?
Sorry, I'm muted too because apparently I can't be trusted to have my phone off mute. Today I too am sitting enjoying a beautiful day. It's a lovely, warm, sunny day, and I'm having a cup of tea out in the sun in front of the warehouse where I'm currently working.
Ah, that's
We get snow flurries today. Fuck all of you.
Yeah, it was 77 here today, and really, really nice outside. So I'm going to go ahead and get Evan in to join us. And David says he's drinking a blackcurrant session mead.
Nice.
And to David Webb,
Hello.
I would like to say,
Hi,
David,
Evan.
It's Hamish here. I am
Hey,
Kombucha,
Vicky, how are
if
you?
you're wondering.
Pretty good. Don't mind us. We chatter. So, Evan Himes, welcome to Got Mead Live. We've got myself and AJ in Canada, Hamish in Australia, and Ryan out in Colorado.
Awesome. How you guys doing?
Good.
We're good. And you know,
Great.
with you
Welcome.
here, we've boxed the compass, so it's pretty cool. since you're up in PA. So, but yeah, welcome
I
to
am, and
the. Go ahead. Sorry.
no problem. I'll warn everyone that this is burning the candle at both ends for me as far as this time of day. So if I'm getting a little drowsy, feel free to nudge me to wake me up.
Well, I feel compelled to ask then, what are you drinking tonight, Evan?
I was afraid that was going to be the first question. I have a nice lineup here that includes both water and coffee, and with a few mead selections within reach.
Cool.
Very nice.
There was a lot of good feedback from your talk at the conference. People were pretty interested in that and all the different varietals that you guys have got.
Yeah, I think I left feeling like we got some really valuable feedback about what what some of the mead makers are looking for on both the home side and commercial side.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on. Well, you guys are doing business with a lot of mead makers, period, but I know of at least 6 or 8 meaderies that you guys are a primary source for.
It seems to be a growing segment, just by nature of the number and how quickly the commercial meaderies are opening. So yeah, it's always good to run into customers and obviously make connections that with folks that maybe down the line might be on the commercial side. So it was a good opportunity to kind of meet the industry as a whole, and really the first time that we've kind of introduced ourselves and really got involved. So it felt like a very successful event overall.
It seemed to go well. The feedback that I heard and that other people have told me that they heard sounded like it was all pretty positive. So we're pleased. AMMA is pleased. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So for those that may not be familiar with you guys, and if anybody's been making mead for any length of time, they've probably heard of you. But tell us a little bit more about who Dutch Gold is and what you guys do. I mean, obviously you sell honey, but how it's all put together and everything.
Sure thing. So Dutch Gold is located in central Pennsylvania, Lancaster County to be specific. The company started there back in the 1940s, so long family history there. Still family owned and operated. Second generation is Nancy Gambers in the CEO and president position, and handles our honey sourcing. A lot of community support and employee support. So that's a big part of benefit of being a Dutch Gold employee is having that employer support there. Generally a lot of interest in moving the honey industry forward. As far as kind of preserving and maintaining some of the ethical components that, unfortunately, when you come into opportunities that money becomes involved, there's always folks that fall on both sides of the coin. So I think Dutch Gold really stands for industry leadership, as we primarily service the food industry, but obviously with the growing number of brewers and mead makers that have an interest in honey, we start to pop up in those places as well. So 1940s founding, central Pennsylvania. We are a very traditional honey processor. So we are no longer doing any beekeeping, or you wouldn't find any bees on site at Dutch Gold. But primarily consider ourselves a honey supplier, in a lot of respects, and feel good about kind of some of the newer offerings that we have as far as our varietal portfolio. So you can certainly find the traditional clovers and wildflowers that you might expect with any honey company, We've carried the alfalfa and buckwheat and orange blossom for many years, and probably over the last couple of years we've brought in new varietals, raspberry, blueberry, avocado, mesquite. So really kind of developing that as a portfolio, as possibly a one-stop shop for your honey needs. And I don't want to overlook our association with McClure's Honey and Maple Products. That's a family-owned and operated maple syrup supplier in Littleton, New Hampshire. Kind of joined Dutch Gold in the late '90s, and so we do have the opportunity to offer maple syrup as well. So focused on packaging, on processing and packaging, and so that's kind of the big overview of what Dutch Gold has to offer.
When you say processing, how do you process the honey? How does it come to you? And yeah.
Good question, Hamish. It's probably certainly one of the vital interests of mead makers is what that looks like. So Dutch Gold has a lot of long relationships with domestic beekeepers. A lot of honey out of the Midwest. Alfalfa comes out of Wyoming. Buckwheat out of North Dakota, Montana areas. But we also, to kind of support what really is our primary business, is kind of bottling for retail sale. You have the kind of price point balance that comes with importing honey. From the processing standpoint, because we're designed for retail business in a lot of respects, the processing element of that is to provide kind of a stopgap to consumers. We are going to be bringing in 55-gallon drums of honey by the trailer load. A lot of that's very unrefined. You can imagine what kind of conditions a hive is going to come in contact with out in the middle of a field, in an orchard, in a grove somewhere. So that honey coming into us in barrels, and our processing elements might potentially include a straining or a filtration to prepare that for sale. So that's kind of the big picture item there.
All right. How many of your honeys do you blend? Obviously, for the market that you have, you're not a little company. You're obviously going to be not really doing single source stuff so much. So how many do you blend, and what do you blend them with?
Good question. But the blending really is a way to kind of keep packaging options flexible. So a blend, even within a clover item, might be a blend of multiple countries of origin. Again, to balance price points, to ensure that in the case of a shortage of one crop and in certain area, there's other options as far as fulfilling that kind of product line. So, for example, clover, obviously predominantly grown in the Midwest, Montana, Wyoming, find clovers out through that cattle country. Domestically, a lot of clover in Canada, also a lot of clover in Argentina. So a very common, what someone might define as, a retail clover blend could consist of honey from those three countries. That's balanced, and Dutch Gold's goal is to deliver honey in a consistent fashion. So we know that as seasons, as weather varies, as seasonal conditions vary, honey color may vary, honey flavors might vary, and within that blend, we can kind of balance between those three elements, those three different sourcing options. We can create a balance that's going to deliver consistency in color and flavor throughout the year and year after year.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So what got you guys so that you're now branching out into the different varietals, beyond things like wildflower clover and orange blossom, which are sort of, well, at least in our world, they're sort of ubiquitous. But some of the varietals you guys are getting into are slightly less common. So I'm just wondering what kind of took you in that direction.
They are. I don't know that was necessarily any one strategic initiative. It certainly was the interest of expanding our retail bottled lines. So those when those came in, the intent was to kind of sell them, anywhere from 12 ounce to 24 ounce, retail packs. The kind of criteria that was why those specific ones were identified, is associated with volume. These particular varietals are, were available enough that we felt like, selling into a retail market, you're talking about a lot of cost and distribution, potentially, paying slotting fees for an item to be slotted with a distributor. And so it's very unfriendly to have seasonal products that go in and out of availability. So these couple of varietals that came in the last few years were available enough as far as volumes that we could kind of make business sense of it for them to be brought in as options for us, to kind of sell into retail as well as bulk markets.
Okay. That is, and what are you guys doing for? You're all out of PA. I mean, do you have like multiple shipping locations, or is it all out of out of the home base?
We stay pretty centralized to Pennsylvania. We would be working with some distributors that would take us out to other parts of the country. That business primarily is going to be more of a very standard, kind of traditional honey offerings as far as what would be selling into maybe food service or selling into kind of ingredient, smaller to mid-sized manufacturing operations, and the types of honey they would be using. It does become increasingly difficult when you have these kind of unique honey styles to work through, kind of traditional means of business. Most of those are interested in honey products that are going to move very quickly, and not, with the risk of crystallization, and the shelf life associated with like a liquid honey. Those are kind of obstacles to kind of getting those out across the country. So we work pretty consolidated. We do a lot of direct business. We offer, the pails are available to ship on, through and purchase online. So we do stay pretty focused in central Pennsylvania. McClure's also does processes honey. So they have some options that are available up in the Northeast for people that are closer to the Northeast New Hampshire area.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, we do stay pretty centrally located in Pennsylvania as far as shipping points.
Okay. And are you guys, I know you do a lot of stuff with big companies that buy, like truckloads of honey and whatnot, but what have you guys made like accommodations that are aimed towards the smaller craft alcoholic beverage industry, mead makers and brewers?
I would say that this, the general demographic, the interest in some of the varietals, we are kind of stepping out of what maybe if you looked at only dollars and cents, what would make sense to be done from a selection standpoint, from the run size standpoint. It may not necessarily be what's going to drive. We know this isn't going to be high volume, quick moving products. But we have an interest in kind of expanding, our retail product and what we have to offering as far as additional services and options for folks like mead makers. So we feel good and kind of at least want to see where kind of the growth of the industry is going to take options like these. Mm-hmm. Obviously, our interest would be that we have these items available. We can grow them and kind of build upon what the industry has started. So that's kind of the at least the thought process is to kind of make connections and understand where maybe this could go within in a 5-year window.
Oh, I think you guys are going to get busier than you think in 5 years.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are much on the name Dutch Gold comes up a lot in the mead making groups, and
a lot.
So, yeah,
yep,
a
even
lot,
those of us out of country know the name.
Yeah.
Well, that's happy to hear it.
Yeah, in your I asked you before about blending. You mentioned that you get a lot of honey from overseas. What sort of countries are you talking about there?
Well, it's interesting. As mead makers are very well versed in both historical aspects of what they're doing, as well as some of the science, some of the math, some of the art. It's interesting to learn more and more about honey itself. I didn't grow up necessarily using any having a particular interest in honey, but obviously as part of the position, it kind of came naturally and was encouraged. Honey is very universal. Bees are kept, around the world with, short of a few places where, weather conditions wouldn't allow for it. So, honey production is a thing in many other countries. We've talked about the clover as far as sourcing on the clover. Argentina is a big one, a South American country that has a very developed beekeeping industry, dating back several decades. As far as honeys that are more geared towards what would be like an ingredient blend of honey, areas, that's, in reference to more of an Asian origin. Vietnam has very developed beekeeping. India, again, massive country, massive population. They are really the up and coming source as far as ingredient style honey. Brazil has always been a long time organic specified honey. Mexico, Canada, so plenty of other very large, very industrious countries that, with the history that comes with beekeeping, have had very developed beekeeping industries for many years.
Interesting.
Speaking
have you guys?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Ian.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna follow on to that, and it made me think of it while you were talking about some of the developing countries that you're working with, and just countries that people may not necessarily think of. I had a friend who was working down in Jamaica for a while on their solar systems down there, and I also connected with a lady down there who was bringing people in on an international grant to develop the beekeeping and honey production in Jamaica. And this friend of mine who was down there said that the honey he'd had there was so amazing because of the floral sources that they have. Mm. Yeah, and I was drooling as he was telling me about it. It sounded so utterly cool. He said that the flavors were different than anything he'd ever tasted in a honey. And, I was just wondering, have you guys looked at, I know that there wouldn't be like mass quantities because it's a smaller country and their honey production is still developing, but still seems like that would be a great place to sort of break out and go, look what we have, nobody else has this. I'd buy
it. You're absolutely right. You talked about the different flavor profiles as a result of the floral sources, and that's Honestly, I'm using the word ingredient style honey, and really it's just how well geared is that flavor to what Americans know. We are the past couple of generations have grown up buying like a very light, delicate, probably primarily clover source, but maybe some intermixed alfalfa, but generally light in color and delicate taste. And that's what they've learned and grown and are accustomed to and understand is honey. And the folks that are diving a little bit deeper and experiencing these other floral sources certainly probably would taste something that someone would say, oh, this flavor is only proper for ingredient honey. Certainly probably not the case. Just a little bit different complexity to the floral sources. Could be a little bit darker if it's in a hotter part of the world, and just certainly Europeans are accustomed to a darker style, a darker color, more robust flavor. That no one maybe in the mead making world is going to turn their nose up at by any means.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I know that from a mead making, and I know Hamish just got to follow on to that too. Just a last comment. I know that from a mead making perspective, if you guys brought in unusual meads that are less available, or honeys, sorry, you know what I'm thinking. They would probably be snapped up just about as fast as you could put it into buckets. So anyway,
yeah, absolutely, and it comes, kind of steers back to that balance. For us, it's a balance. It's we need to kind of maintain our operational efficiencies so that it would make sense, with the volume available and how that's going to sell in the marketplace. So yeah, absolutely. We understand what, especially after the conference, what mead makers are looking for. And we're kind of, walking that fine line to see what we're able to offer, how we can make it work in kind of smaller, within smaller opportunities, knowing that it's not core business, but it's certainly something that's going to grow over the years.
Yeah, I think you guys are probably going to see that go up a lot. Hamish, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember discussing that with you at the conference too, with your eucalypt honey, which I couldn't really place because you then told me it was a blend of a lot of eucalyptus honeys, which is why I couldn't really work out what it was. It was a very nice honey, don't get me wrong, but it would be nice if you could try bringing in some individual varietals, even if it was only a couple, because the flavor differences in them are quite amazing in that regard.
Hamish can help you. he brought a sample of, what was it, 6 honeys last year, Hamish?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, like 6 different Australian honeys, and it was really cool because hardly any of us had ever tasted any of the Australian honeys, so it was really neat to get to try that.
Yeah, no, Hamish actually gave me some very good feedback on the honey. It was very much appreciated, and it's kind of one of those things that we're in certain instances we're not connected to that source and really understanding of what expectations should be as far as certain honey in a region. That's interesting. The eucalyptus was interesting in that we had it in for several years, and it's something that's we are intentionally kind of holding on to just because we really like the flavor. We have it in a retail pack, and it's a very long process to replenish that once it's gone. So just in the interest of the folks that do the sourcing, they're kind of holding off on, pushing that out and making that available by the pail for that reason. And I think it speaks to, for us, it's kind of a learning process. It speaks to what could potentially be happening as far as some of the consolidation that happens in country before honey's exported. We obviously can have more control with things that are coming out of the Dakotas, and we can, pick up the phone and call the beekeeper. Raspberry coming out of Washington, a lot of direct connections there, a lot of, understanding about the sourcing and what they're doing as far as putting together that lot of honey for us. And maybe that was just a little missing there on the eucalyptus purchase.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. One of the other things I wanted to ask you is you were talking about sourcing a lot of your honey from Asia. How do you maintain your quality? So I know that the Chinese have been fingered for bringing in some terrible honey doctored with glucose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So with your international honeys, how do you actually maintain that quality and guarantee that people haven't been playing with it?
Sure. So that kind of links back to a certification called True Source Honey, True Source Certified, as it's known. Really developed back in 2008, 2009, and really became available in the early 11 or 12. So very, very young certification, but going back a few years before that, there was that evidence. There was what they call the Honeygate, 2008, where some American honey companies were identified for understanding that they were purchasing honey that had been adulterated in some fashion. Really kind of drew a lot of attention to that. The industry as a whole. Not good for business. It's driving down market rates. You're creating a lot of confusion. You're selling customers obviously product that is mislabeled. A lot of issues all around. Representation from Dutch Gold as well as several other places within the industry. Kind of create this small little task force to better understand the issues and kind of find a way to provide some prevention and some security to the industry. It's everyone's livelihood was really at stake as far as fixing the issue. And not to say that it's fixed, but I think it's at least a step in the right direction. And what the True Source certification provides for is more visibility to the supply chain. So you have each step of the way, and an international supply chain could consist of, obviously beekeepers in country. There may be a consolidator or an exporter that beekeeper is, that multiple beekeepers are selling to, that's actually preparing the honey for export. True Source certification would identify those beekeepers, would identify those exporters, would identify the importers and packers purchasing in the U.S. As qualified individuals in the supply chain. There's audits at each of those levels, and that would include kind of some financial balances to ensure that the sourcing that is on record matches what inventory might be on site there. And even some pollen analysis associated with that to confirm those origins. And the other piece of the puzzle is that in those risky countries where there is, potential for issues, whether that be historical or something, is a little off about the development of the industry, of the beekeeping industry in that country that doesn't match potential volumes that are being exported. Those areas would be identified, and the True Source certification would allow for samples to be taken from lots of honey before it's exported from that country in heading to the U.S. So there's plenty of pieces there that as the kind of industry grows, certification grows, it can continue to develop and in a sense react and prepare as much prevention and build in prevention that's able to happen.
I really like that. That gives me a comfort level with all of the stuff that's been coming out of the news about adulterated honey and stuff like that. And you just if you're buying from some places, you don't really know what you're getting. And that's tough. From a mead making perspective, obviously we have maybe a higher standard when it comes to honey just because it's the central thing for us. But still, even when I just go buy honey to put on toast, I'm looking at it going, origins? Okay, who packed this? I mean, I literally, it's terrible. It's like when I pick a wine. God, so I'm judging it. It's kind of scary. I'm kind of curious because this is a big conversation in a lot of the mead groups, both home and professional.
If I can interrupt.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
That actually makes me ask a question. Have you ever considered putting tasting notes on your honeys, like you would get on a bottle of wine? Now that Vicky has brought that up.
That's a really good question. So I was actually took responsibility to kind of write some of the descriptors that are on our new retail packaging, and I was kind of coming into this with a little wet behind the ears as far as what that would look like. We do try. I think as I learn and understand honey to a deeper degree, I think that's certainly the intent. Would be to try to capture that and describe it as best as possible. Although and maybe this is an open, good discussion topic. There's really, I would assume that there is a kind of general vein of, yeah, that's a flavor note that's a flavor note that's not. But is there some degree of subjectivity in the taster's palate that would kind of identify different flavors? Or do you guys experience that where you're tasting honey aside someone else and they taste one thing and you taste something that's just slightly different? Is that normal? Is that a thing, or is that a misconception there?
Well,
I know what happens with meads.
Everybody talk at once. Go for it, AJ. Sorry.
I know for sure that. I know for sure that happens when everybody's tasting the same mead, and we got a little bit of that when Amina Harris and Hamish and I, and I think a couple other people were sitting around tasting the honeys that Hamish had brought last year. And it was one of those things where you hear someone who's used to tasting stuff going on about something, and it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I taste that. Do I taste that? I'm not sure if I taste that. And then, when they say something, it's like, okay, yes, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one who tastes that. So I think, going to taste stuff like that in a group has its benefits, but also you got to look at where everybody's coming from.
For sure.
Yeah. Ryan?
I'd like to add a little bit to that too, please. I find oftentimes that sometimes when a couple people or more are trying to give some sensory notes on things, they might be talking about the same thing and might have a hard time putting a word to it, and then somebody will say, to me it tastes like this, and then oftentimes the whole group will chime up and say, oh yeah, that's perfect, that's exactly the word I was looking for. So yes, a lot of people taste the same things but might call it something different based on the amount of vocabulary they have in their pocket, so to speak.
Well, that reminds me actually of winemaking. There's a lot of Australian wines are trying to be sold into China, and telling the Chinese about the wine and describing it was a really big problem, because a lot of the descriptors they've never tasted before. Like they don't typically have blueberries, they don't typically have this flavor and that flavor. And so someone actually set about making a whole new language for winemaking that related the flavors to things that that Chinese have in their everyday
vocabulary.
Diet and vocabulary, yeah. And so it is a very, very big thing. Is that this particular thing that I eat here gives me this sensation, and so does your honey, therefore I relate them. But there is something else normally that could also give you that same flavor. So it really depends on who you're marketing it to, as well as who's doing the tasting. So I believe if you're going to try and taste it, you definitely need a group, because one person will do their best but often not quite nail it. Whereas a group will, with a little bit of a discussion, like 2 or 3 people who know what they're looking for, we'll be able to judge that better.
Yeah. Well, and there's some weird honeys out there too, even for stuff that are produced in America, and I'm sure there are in other countries as well. But I mind running across carrot honey a couple of years ago at the Mazer Cup. It was a carrot honey traditional, and we're all going. Everybody at the table's going. I have no idea what the characteristics of carrot honey are, because none of us.
What
had
is
had
this
it.
supposed to taste like anyway?
Right. Yeah, what's it supposed to taste like? So, yeah, circling back around, Evan, to the idea of it would be so cool if there were descriptors attached to to the various honey varietals, or even to the blended honeys, to give people an idea of what to expect. Depending, again, like Hamish says, on who you're marketing it to, but to give them a frame of reference that they can go, oh, all right then,
And even if it's in your own language and it's not in the language that suits the person who's buying it, if you say hints of cinnamon and someone likes it, and in 3 other honeys you've written hints of cinnamon, then they can expect that they're going to see something similar, and it will help to educate. So there's all good things. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I like it, and I think maybe we're just need to kind of pull that through between. Yeah, I'm sure there's descriptors written a few different places, and maybe they just need to. We need to make sure that it's available and accessible, no matter which package, size, type, et cetera, someone might be looking for. But no, I appreciate that feedback. That's certainly something, food for thought that we can look to improve.
Yeah, I mean, for honey snobs like ourselves, and and anybody really who is a foodie. I mean, we get right down to it. It's anybody who's a foodie, not just mead makers who are, by definition, we have to be honey snobs. But anybody who's a foodie loves to know, like what they're going into. When I'm cooking with honey, I go through, because I've got buckwheat honey, I've got orange blossom honey, I've got blueberry honey, I've got raspberry honey, I've got Tupelo honey, I've got all these different honeys that I have, like 1 or 2 or 3 pounds of that I use in cooking and flavoring things. And so I'll go, when I'm making something, I'll go through and look at, and I'll actually go and open them up and taste them again to try to decide if that's going to go right with what it is that I'm trying to do. And it's, it's just it would be really cool to have that. And Dutch Gold being kind of a leader in honey distribution in the country, if you guys kind of let out of the gate with something like that, pretty sure, you'd be followed very closely by your competition. They'd be right there going, wait, what are you guys doing? But yeah. I know that your business is primarily to the larger companies who are more looking for a blended honey for cooking purposes and baking purposes. But gosh, I just can't help but think that haute cuisine, fine dining, top shelf restaurants, all of whom use honey in various capacities. There's a whole gourmet sort of market that's wide open because nobody's doing that.
Yeah. And if I'm making a cocktail, I'm definitely going to want to know if I'm going to be putting a spoonful of fresh horse dung, or whether I'm putting a nice floral orange citrus in there. It's going to make a difference.
Yeah, the fresh horse dung would be a couple of the eucalypts that they have. Instead of cat pee was another one that came up fairly often.
Or a barnyard for your buckwheat.
Yeah. Notes of fresh barnyard tastes an awful lot like the locker room after the big game.
Not that bad, or at least mine
is.
But you mentioned getting access to these notes no matter the size of the packaging. What I've seen you with some very small things to the table, and I'm hearing that you also supply big companies. So if I were to order honey from you, and if I were to live in the US, what would I expect to be able to have shipped to me in order of scale here?
So I would say I'll start with kind of framing that as far as operations go. Half of the volume that we work with at Dutch Gold is going to go through our bottling operations. So that could be anywhere from about 8 ounces to 5 pounds in bottle size. Most common being going to be, your 12-ounce bear as like the kind of classic iconic package. But 16-ounce, 12-ounce is a very common retail size package. Up to, the 5-pound is really more of a wholesaler club style store offering. So that kind of comprises our retail options as far as packaging. On the bulk side, most of the varietals are going to be available by the 60-pound pail, the 5-gallon pail. We do have some opportunities to provide those by the 55-gallon or 650 pounds legal sale weight. A lot of food manufacturers at the level where they're using some pretty high volumes of honey are going to be in what's referred to as a tote, sort of a pallet-sized bulk container, usually weighing somewhere in the frame of 3,000 to 3,200 pounds per tote. So that covers the range of what of our offerings, and kind of depending on how specific the item is, how much volume is kind of associated with the sales. You might find any variety of mix and match of what we're able to offer as far as the varietals go.
Okay, so most mead makers would be interested in your 5-pound or your 60-pound bucket. There's nothing in between.
There's
no
nothing,
1
but
gallons?
the way
we
you
have
asked
a
that,
30-pound standard over here, so that's why I was wondering.
So we've been kind of toying with the idea of trying to fill that void in between, because it hasn't gone unnoticed. I mean, that's obviously a big jump from 5 pounds to 60 pounds. The interesting thing about the pails is, or the challenging thing, I think I'll redefine as challenging, is trying to get someone who might be interested in a pail or two, but is not within a radius where they're going to drive into Lancaster to pick it up. So getting those shipped with a parcel service
It's expensive.
has proven to be challenging. There's a lot of expense to it. Obviously 60 pounds isn't a very normal weight. It's, usually falls in an oversized weight range. You have a pail that's designed with a handle, but the expectation for a parcel service is you're putting it in a box. Depending on how you're handling it, it's a little bit top heavy. So we're actually, if you went online and bought a pail from us, we're in a kind of special program with UPS that's shipping them, by the pail without the box, because it allows the handlers access to the pail handle. So we're kind of looking at how we can overcome a few of those obstacles there, and maybe something more like a 30-pound pail will be more appropriate size, easier to handle. Not everyone's able to lift and move and kind of work with 60 pounds as easy as maybe they could with 30 pounds. So that's certainly something we've thought about and tossed around. And, if in a year you see a 30-pound pail from Dutch Gold, maybe you'll think back to this conversation.
I'm surprised you guys aren't doing 1-gallon jars, like plastic jars of it. You see that a lot in a lot of the smaller honey distributors. They'll do 1 gallon and then 5 gallon for the meat making crowd.
Ooh. Isn't 5 pounds a gallon?
No, 12 pounds U.S.
Oh.
Yeah, 5 pounds is about,
okay.
Just under half a gallon. Which he was saying that's what they do to the big box stores, so that's what you usually find at like Costco.
Yeah, Costco, it's
a
3 kilogram is about a 2. It's kind of similar to a 2-liter bottle, so yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why not a 1 gallon. Some of the other, like you said, some of the other, that's common enough size, in a jug or something more kind of food service oriented. I'm not sure. But yeah, we've looked at maybe a pail format as far as, a bucket with a lid and, see what we can do to kind of, I think like you said, there's an opportunity there. Not everyone wants 60 pounds, but you need a few more than just a single 5 pound. So kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's a thing to think about because that's a very popular size with mead makers, especially if they're trying out different varietals. They might buy 4 different 1-gallon jugs or bottles of different honeys. Oh, and Joe Vinciguerra just said you should ship 30 pounds worth of Honey Bear bottles in a cardboard box. Can you see squeezing out there 30 pounds worth of Honey Bears into your mead? My God, I think I'd lose my mind.
You take off the lids, Vicky. You take off the lids.
Yeah, it still doesn't come
Even
out
then-
that way. Even then, it's a bitch.
Yeah, I've worked with the plastic 1 kilogram ones, and yeah, it's the same kind of bitch. But
Yeah.
my apiary typically doesn't use the 5-gallon pails because no one can lift them. They use the 3-gallon or whatever it is for 30 pound.
Yeah,
So,
three
and
gallons can
that's
be
enough to
about
do.
35 pounds, yeah, ish.
Yeah, and that's definitely enough to do. That's enough to get you going on at least a 5-gallon batch and then some. 5-gallon batch and a couple of smaller batches. So I find that to be a fairly convenient size for me. Plus, I can lift it.
There's a lot to be said for that. Oh, I meant to ask earlier, Evan, do you guys only ship to the U.S. or do you also do Canada?
We are shipping. We do generally restrict shipments to the U.S. We kind of have a stipulation where if you're willing to arrange your own logistics, that we're not going to tell you can't take honey and send it out of the country. There's not any particular reason other than trying to make sure we're not overreaching in our expertise and in how, there is, especially in Europe, there's obviously a lot of stipulations around honey imports. Obviously Canada is pretty friendly, but at the same time, we don't want to position ourselves as the experts, and we're setting ourselves up for failure as far as not being prepared to meet all those qualifications. So generally, we try to remain within the U.S. Unless you're willing to kind of take on the challenge of logistics to get it out of the country.
So that means you'll have to smuggle it, AJ.
I would declare it like a good Canadian.
But AJ, you have so much good honey up there already. I'm not sure what you want from us.
Orange blossom. We don't grow orange trees up here. I
No
adore
trees
orange
in
blossom
Canada.
honey.
Yeah, she's desperate for enough orange blossom honey to make a mead, and we've been trying.
Well,
to
I have
work
enough
our
to
way
make
into
a
it.
gallon, but that's hardly enough.
Yeah,
really.
you'll just get into it, and then it'll be gone.
Yeah, I'll drink it all, and then I'll be it. Then I'll have to send my mom after more.
Yeah, I have checked many a honey in a checked bag to take on an airplane, so that could be an option for you in the future.
There we go.
Yeah, definitely. It's certainly a thought.
So, have you guys ever worked with meadow foam or tupelo? Those are two of the sort of rarer, especially these days, honeys in the U.S.
So once upon a time, Tupelo was in the Dutch Gold Catalog.
Yeah, until the drought, 7 years of that.
Right. It was kind of the story went that I'm not sure that we haven't seen it in my time. I haven't, I wasn't part of that. But I understand that at the point that Nancy wasn't able to fully source Tupelo that she felt was at a high enough percent that it, by her book and her, forever number of years of experience, kind of still maintained the characteristics that she felt good about selling it as Tupelo. That's when she felt like it wasn't, no longer qualified as something that she wanted to kind of struggle to source and offer. So that was probably about 5 years ago was the last Tupelo that we saw. I've had it since then. I've had meads made from Tupelo. I recognize, kind of the aura about it, but it's been a while. meadow foam never hit, was never part of something we were able to source. And I think as much interest as there is for it, I don't know that I necessarily see that changing unless, production increases pretty significantly.
Yeah, it's a small batch honey for sure.
Yeah, I think I had had a taste of it through, I think the National Honey Board was sampling it at an event. I think maybe a craft brewers conference a few years ago was the first time I tasted it. And again, similar situation. I've had it and I recognize the interest in it, but not certain that there's enough supply for us that it would make sense for us to get involved.
Yeah. What about things like, I know I've seen a rising prominence of mesquite and avocado and a few of the other varietals that used to be like, kind of hard to come by, but nowadays you see them quite a bit. Mesquite quite a bit, actually, more than I used to.
Sure. Those are two we do have. Kind of background on the avocado, obviously with the explosion of avocados themselves, that being, cultivated and, even beekeepers being paid, pollination fees to kind of support the yields there. That became more and more prevalent. Mexico's honey supply, ironically, does sell very well into Europe. So we don't actually get, a huge portion of the honey produced in that country into the U.S. And avocado, I'm told, is a very common piece of kind of a darker blend that Europeans are interested in. Again, I know, kind of blending out those unique characteristics, but at the same time, their general interest, some of those blends are kind of develop into a unique, interesting taste profile in themselves. Dating a couple of years back when we saw there was avocado on the market and available in volumes that made sense for us, that was an opportunity for us to offer it. What are you guys hearing or know as far as mead makers using avocado?
It's actually gaining popularity really rapidly. Carvin was playing with it a lot. He's down in Arizona, so he's closer to the source, so to speak. And he started messing about with it, and a bunch of other people were messing about with it. And there was enough people that were well known in the community that all of a sudden everybody was using it. I actually, the first time I'd ever gotten to try it was when you had it at the conference this year, because it just doesn't get distributed over here all that much, and I hadn't gotten any from you guys, so I didn't even know you had it, to be perfectly honest. So now that I know you do and that I like it, I'm going to be getting some. So, to me, it's not, I adore avocados, but my brain didn't really want to process what an avocado honey would taste like. So I wasn't 100%. On the other hand, I'm a huge fan of mesquite. I love the smoky notes that mesquite has.
Yeah, that I agree. That's one of my favorite honeys in our catalog. I think it's actually our lightest in a lot of cases. That it just has that nice golden hue to it, and the flavor that comes out of there, I've been struggling to place it exactly and kind of identify a few hints of this or that, but definitely kind of that falls in that confectionery range. If you're working with your UC Davis honey sensory round there, but yeah, I really like it. I've had mead made from the mesquite and find it to be really enjoyable. Obviously, it's not going to hold a candle to orange blossom, but at the same time, I feel like it makes what I've heard and feedback I've gotten is that it makes a really great base mead to kind of build off of. So I'm not sure what anyone else has heard or experienced as far as the mesquite goes.
Mesquite's a wonderful honey to make all kinds of good things with.
Yeah.
I've actually done quite a bit with the avocado, and quite frankly, I think it's not probably one to be used as the prima donna in a mead. In other words, it's a good piece to use as a supporting cast member. But at least with the 5 or 6 different yeast strains that I tried to figure out if I could make a good traditional out of it, I really never found a good marriage that made a good traditional, in my opinion. So I stopped trying to make it a traditional. I just now use it as a blend. But the mesquite does wonderful by itself on its own.
Yeah, I found the avocado reminded me a bit of the buckwheat I get, only a little bit lighter.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's how I tend to use the buckwheat. Is I'm not sure I would like a mead made with nothing but I definitely like tossing a kilogram or 2 in with every 5-gallon batch.
Incidentally, too, this might help you to find the language to use if you guys ever did decide you wanted to start adding tasting notes, and or just for your own knowledge. If you go to the BJCP website and look in the mead portion, they have some study guides for people that go there to learn to become a certified judge. And in those study guides, there's an entire list of different honeys with all the descriptives for them. And I think that would help you to gather a much larger vocation. So I would just suggest maybe going and looking there, and I think you'll enjoy what you'll find there.
I've got quite an extensive list of descriptions of honey garnered from all kinds of different places, friends, people who've evaluated them, things like that on Got Mead. So another nice place to get some information.
Yeah, sometimes you've got the taste in mind and you can't put a word to it, and you just read as many words as you can and maybe something will click.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and don't forget, there's always the UC Davis Honey Wheel. Which is wonderful for helping you to put flavor descriptors together. It is just awesome.
Not only the honey wheel, but wine wheels will help you get that as well.
Yeah. Well, UC Davis just happened to do one strictly for honey, which I thought was kind of cool. You know.
Right. I love it.
Yeah. Evan, I
Yeah,
thought
no,
I heard you start.
that's all.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. That's all really great advice. I definitely familiar with the UC Davis, the honey wheel there. I'll have to check out the BJCP. That sounds like there's a lot of good stuff involved there, as well as the Got Mead site. So I appreciate all that advice.
Hey, no worries. Yeah, I'm just my mind is spinning with the possibilities of varietals marketed from a gourmet standpoint now. My foodie side is taking over.
Vicky's having a foodie-gasm.
Yeah, well, I'm a foodie, so what can I say? So, moving on to different things, I hear a rumor that you are starting your first mead, Evan. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I think that vicious rumor I can confirm to be true.
Cool.
Welcome to the dark side.
You have been assimilated.
Yes, I think I had a really good experience. Throughout the past 6 months or so, I've been reading plenty in preparation and study to understand what I was getting into coming to the conference and speaking this year. So I had plenty of tidbits from different sources. I did identify a recipe on the Got Mead site. I think it's the Joe's Clover and Orange. Very very simple recipe. Kind of no frills there as a good starting point, and had some random half bottles of honey, here and there between work and the house that I kind of pulled together, and kind of came up with a wildflower, primarily wildflower honey blend. Had some cinnamon in there, had some orange. Generally followed your newbie guide as far as some of the specific questions I had.
You can always call me too, Evan. You know that, right?
Yeah, but everyone I talk to, they're like, before you ask all these questions, just read the guide, and you'll be able to answer your own questions without people repeating themselves or continually referencing something that's
newbie,
pretty readily.
Yeah, really, a newbie who reads. Oh my God, I think you're alone in the world.
I had to stop myself a few times when I'm like, I really wish someone would tell me. I could probably look that up and answer my own question. So I still have a few questions that I haven't looked up yet, but I'll spare you the finer details.
Come on. You can ask. It's cool.
It's the perfect time.
Yeah, come on.
Well, first, we're going to need to know your recipe.
Yeah, you got to tell us what you're doing first before you ask us how to do it.
Okay, so I have I took a 5-gallon pail and punched out a hole so I could set up a little the airlock. So I know that I'm still unsure about the headroom situation, but I have a 2-gallon batch in a 5-gallon pail. I read that was okay. So I'm working with about 7 pounds of honey, and then kind of filled up the rest of that 2-gallon point. A large orange sliced into eighths. 25 cranberries. I didn't have any raisins according to the recipe, but I thought cranberries would be a good substitution. I think that would still provide I think it's sulfur that they're looking for from the raisins. But pretty simple, and that's about it. Using the Lavlin 71B yeast. So I kind of followed, standard directions. What I ran into the first time was that I actually think because I was had to heat some of the honey because it was crystallized, and I understood that it needed to be dissolved into the water, that I think I pitched the yeast when the honey water solution was still too hot. So I potentially didn't get very much result, and I decided it was best to repitch it. And so ultimately I ended up, it still isn't as vigorously, I'm not sure what the right word
bubbling
is.
Bubbling is a good word.
Bubbling.
Yeah. Is your airlock doing anything?
It is. It's probably bubbling at a rate of like 1 bubble per 10 seconds.
That's not terrible. Have you taken a hydrometer reading? You read my newbie guide, so I'm assuming you bought a hydrometer, Evan.
Well,
public shaming of the honey guy. Yeah.
If you're following Joe's Ancient Orange, it doesn't involve the hydrometer.
It does not involve a hydrometer.
Be excused for that.
Yeah, JAO does not follow hydrometers.
Yeah, AJ came to my defense there. I heard that. I appreciate it, AJ. When I say I followed the recipe, I meant I looked at the recipe, I looked at the stuff I had, and then I decided what I could make work.
Okay, so you took the time-honored tradition of mead makers everywhere and made some shit up, and that's cool. We all do. That's how we get these recipes in the first place. Is somebody went, oh wait, what if I throw 10 pounds of blueberries in this?
And if you take good notes, you know what you did,
right?
So you can either repeat it or never do that again.
Or never do that again. Exactly. Yeah, you're taking notes, right?
I do. I'm looking at my notes here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I accomplished it. I sanitized, which obviously is a very important step. Mm-hmm. And I heard mixed reviews about whether or not you're supposed to activate the yeast or not, but went through the process to do that.
It's always good to proof
and
yeast.
Other than,
you can't go wrong with doing it. It doesn't hurt anything.
Right. I figured I had the time and was willing to put in effort. And the only thing that I was a little, because I kind of built the pail into into a fermenter versus using a carboy. Joe's recipe recommended to shake vigorously, and I didn't. with
you
a
do.
hole
You shake
punch
the
in
crap
the top
out of
of
it.
Yeah, so I had the hole already punched. I I was a little uncertain about doing that without.
Big pile of napkins.
Okay, a vigorous stirring will work for shaking.
Shaking's more fun.
Well, shaking's more fun, but if you've got a hole in your, if you got a bung hole in your thing already.
Back when I was first,
not when it weighs 30 or 40 pounds. It's not fun at all.
When I was making
nip down to your
5-gallon
local
batches,
hardware and
when I was
get
making
a paint stirrer.
That's true. Yeah, paint stirrers are great. Have you got an electric drill, Evan?
I do. I don't have the. Someone recommended I get something that would adapt to a drill, but
yeah, you just
I had a large.
Yeah.
So paint stir into the drill?
Yeah, just go to Home Depot and get a paint stir. It's basically a stick with a couple of paddles on it, and you put that on your drill, and then you just and just be careful.
Start really slowly.
Yeah, do it slowly
if it's
because it
already
will
fermented, do it
foam.
really slowly.
Yeah, how much headspace do you have in your batch? How much space between the top of it and the mead?
I have many inches.
Many inches.
Good.
Okay, good. That's good. That means it won't bubble over when you stir it. In the first third of the fermentation, the yeast are in an aerobic cycle. They want air. They need to breathe. So you want to whiz it up because that adds oxygen to the mead for the yeast to use, and degasses it because it releases the CO2 that is produced as the yeast are doing their thing. So, and then later on, you whiz it a lot more slowly and gently to just degas because you don't want to add oxygen at that point. But that's why a hydrometer can come in handy, because you can figure out where you are in the process. You know.
I like it. I didn't make that part of my initial essential
None of us did.
purchase, but
none of us did when we started.
See now, if you were scared of asking a question, if you'd asked the question, you would have bought one because it was the first thing you would have been.
First thing we would have said is, "Do you have your hydrometer and paint stirrer yet?" Yeah, we're right after the "And did you buy Star Sand?" You know.
Hey, some of us got along just fine with it. The paint stirrer.
Yes, well.
I was working off of a friendly volunteer photographer of yours at the conference who was like, "You haven't made a batch of mead? This is all you need to do." And it was like she was trying to tell me the least number of things to buy so that it didn't seem like a daunting task. Hydrometer didn't make her list, so I thought it was acceptable not to make that a first purchase.
Actually, I found, having started from the wine area when I started, buying just the standard beginner's wine kit had pretty much everything you needed to get you from A to Z without too much kerfuffle.
Okay.
Because it's got typically they'll have a bucket with a hole in the lid already drilled for you. They'll have a bung that fits in it, and they'll have an airlock, and the airlock and bung will also fit in the carboy they'll give you. And it'll also
but he's got a million buckets and a drill.
That's true, but you'll also get the racking cane. I mean, I just found it was useful, even if you can always use more buckets. But I just found it was really useful because you pretty much got everything you needed to get started, and then after that you figure out what else you need and then add to your kit. But I don't think there's anything in the standard newbie's wine kit that I don't still use fairly regularly, unless I've already broken it and replaced it with another of the same.
I'm kind of with AJ.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah,
that's definitely true.
I'm a pack rat. I use it till it dies, and then I buy a new one. So I mean, my drawer of various and sundry supplies is kind of ridiculous because of that. But I mean, it sounds like you're off to a good start. Have you been tasting it as it's going through the process, Evan?
It's very young. I think I put it together on Sunday. So.
Oh, okay, like really young. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you taste it when you pitched it?
No, I'm guilty of not tasting it when I pitched it.
That's okay. Again, none of us. I never used to. I'd put it all together and then patiently wait for it to be done so I could taste it, never realizing that I could taste it like all the way through, and that was okay because hey, it was my mead.
Right.
But
absolutely.
I make too much.
It's like cooking.
I make too much mess to taste it. It's always on my fingers. I can lick it off, or I've got some utensil I need to clean that I put in my mouth or something.
Yeah, that's the other advantage of having the hydrometer. As soon as you pull it out, you put it in your hand to walk it over to the sink where you're going to rinse it off, and then you let go off your hand.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, when you're using your hydrometer, some people, and I alternate between dropping the hydrometer. If it's in a pail, I'll just drop it right into the pail because it's easy to get a reading that way. But if I'm fermenting in a carboy, which I don't do nearly as much as I used to, or if I'm making a 1-gallon batch where it's not deep enough, then I'll use the tube that comes with the hydrometer. There's a tall, narrow tube that comes with it. That's the measuring tube. And you put however much in there so that the thing doesn't hit the bottom when you put it in. Get your hydrometer reading, and then that you've got that mead. And there's two schools. One says go ahead and pour it back in. After all, you did sanitize that thing, didn't you? And then there's the other school that says, oh hell no, don't put that back in there. Anything can happen. I'm on the second thing. And besides, you can then drink it. And it's great because it's like cooking. You know, how you're cooking, you're sort of always tasting it to see, is it where I want it to be? Is it, does it taste right? Does it need more salt? Whatever it is. Mead's the same way. It's a recipe. So if you're tasting it throughout, then you get, you maybe get 2/3 of the way through and go, wow, if I threw a little cinnamon in this, that would totally make that honey pop. And so then you know to do that. But if you wait until you're done, then A, you have to wait until you're done, which kind of sucks. And B, you don't really know if there's places where you might have changed things in the process. Did you know? If you were aware.
I appreciate all the advice.
You came into the den of lions, man.
I will start tasting. Certainly.
Yeah, no, and I mean, have fun with it. That's the thing. It's so funny because I've been doing this 25 years, and the first 15 of them was treating it like it was some kind of holy thing. Like, if I was to touch it, that would somehow make it. And I never really thought about it at the time, but it was just like I'd sit there going, I wish it were done. I wish it were done. Never thinking that I should be playing with it. I should be tasting it. I should be seeing what's going on here. And getting a sense of it, because I learned so much once I started doing that, because I could see, like, you could taste when it's starting to go, if it starts to go sideways because there's been a temperature spike, for instance. And, all right, you're up in PA. What temps are you fermenting at right now? What is the temperature in the area where you're fermenting, in the room or whatever?
So I have it down in the basement.
That's good.
Couldn't give you an exact temperature. I got a feeling that it could be potentially low 60s. The recipe notes seem to, tell you to put it in the corner of your kitchen because it likes a higher temperature. But I also, between my own personal variations and using a different yeast, I wasn't sure if that still held up. So I figured
no, it doesn't. You're doing the right thing. 60 is good. That's for bread yeast. You do not. Well, that's not true, actually.
No, he's using 7.1B, which is low.
I know.
It likes low temps, like 62 to 65.
Yeah, yes.
It's not as bad as D47, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing the right thing.
There's actually been a lot of research lately by Carvin and Bobby Slans and a few other people doing hot ferments. So it's not right for me to say it's no good doing it hot. What it is right for me, I feel to say, is that for the young mead maker, you get more reliable, cleaner results if you have a lower fixed temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now,
Hi, this is Ryan. I'm sorry to do this. I get so many junk phone calls and roto calls every day that I just will not answer my phone anymore unless I know who's calling. So if you are calling because you need some work done in your home or your personal friend or whatever, please leave a message and I promise I'll get back to you just as soon as possible.
Hang on.
I'm getting well over 10 junk calls.
I thought that was like Ryan, He did that really well. Like, it sounds like it was really him. Sorry about that.
Welcome to Got Mead Live.
Yeah, welcome to Got Mead Live. So we're live and unscripted, yes.
At least funny. You can be certain there's no dead air.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it sounds like you're off to a pretty good start, Evan. And you're reading, and that's something that a lot of people don't do. Did you get the books? So Ken Tran's Complete Mead Maker and the Complete Guide to Making Mead.
I don't own any of the books. I could see having them in the very near future, but I don't currently own them.
Okay. They're good resources. There's a lot of good information in there. Between the two, they give you just about all the solid, scientifically proven, totally backed up principles from people who make really dang good mead. You know?
Yeah, and Ken was at the Cup too. You could have scored yourself a signed copy.
Yeah, you probably could have.
Yeah, well, things I know for next year for sure.
Yeah, you're coming next year, right? I mean,
I don't foresee you guys letting me out of coming next year. So yeah,
really no. Yeah, you're not going to get away that easily. As a matter of fact, I'm going to work on making you guys a sponsor, but that's another thing, you know. But yeah, I mean, Dutch Gold provides a lot of good honey to a lot of people. A lot of people.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see how this batch turns out. I'm using it as an educational experience, but I'm sure I turn out with something. My tastes aren't too high at this point that will enjoy it one way or another, however it turns out.
Cool. Yeah, well, start tasting it now. So every time you go to, just check it out or shake it or stir it or whatever, take a little sample. What I do when I want to sample mine is I take a shot glass and I just dunk it in Star San. Sanitize the shot glass and then just get a little sample. See what it's doing.
Also, one of the helpful hints for when you get more equipment is get a wine thief that your hydrometer fits into. Yeah. And then you can just sanitize all of that, dip it in, and you can pull a sample and then put it right back in, or pull a sample and pour it into a glass if you want to try it.
I appreciate that recommendation.
If you don't know what a wine thief is,
how got do you get a hydrometer into your wine thief?
Mine's big enough. I have a large.
Have like a tiny little hole on the top for your thumb. Like how do you?
No, I've got a great big one. I have like my wine thief is like probably 2.5 feet long, and the hole in it's big enough to put it. Now the front end of it won't fit into a 1-gallon carboy. That's the only drawback with this one. But the one I've got's big enough. I can just drop my hydrometer carefully into it, and then draw sanitizer up into the whole thing. Pop the hydrometer down underneath the sanitizer so the whole thing gets sanitized, let the water out, spray the outside of it with the sanitizer, and away I go, and it fits into the 3-gallon, fits into the 5-gallon, and fits into the buckets.
And what you have to cap the top with the butt of your palm or something to get it to seal?
It's got a valve on the bottom.
Oh.
And I usually just sort of draw by mouth because my mouth isn't actually touching anything that's going to be touching the thing, but if you were silly about that, you could use like just the squeeze bulb from a turkey baster, just use that to draw it up and then let go, and then you could do something to avoid having to put your mouth on it if you're squeamish about having your mouth anywhere near your mead.
Yeah, I used to use a turkey baster to pull up samples and just sanitize a turkey baster. I had one that was set aside just for that.
Yeah, I keep having my turkey basters. The rubber heads always disintegrate,
they do,
that's why I gave up on that. And it's the one that I've got's nice and round, and it fits in everything except for the 1-gallon boys. And if you've got a deep enough batch, you don't even need to draw the water up into it. If it's deep enough that the whole hydrometer would float anyway. Valve on the end, it's like an oversized bottle filler almost.
I can't tell you how many years I would just drop my hydrometer into a 5-gallon carboy, which had, like 4 or 5 inches of headspace, and then I'd be in there with sanitized tongs trying to fetch the damn thing.
Okay, the trick for that one is you sanitize a piece of wax dental floss. You sanitize a piece of wax dental floss, wrap it around, and tie it a couple of times around the thing, and that way it doesn't weigh enough that it'll affect it. Mm-hmm. But you've got a handle to pull it back out again.
Yeah, eventually
all kinds of handy stupid sheets.
Eventually, I used fishing line, but then I just stopped putting it in the carboy. That seemed to work pretty well.
Well, once I got the hydrometer fitting into the wine thief, I didn't need to drop it in a carboy anymore, but. Yeah, otherwise I only ever drop it into a carboy I can, reach the top of.
Exactly. Now, Evan, you see how crazy we are?
I can't help...
He's probably over there going, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into?
it was a few, what kitchen utensil that I can easily sanitize to take care of a few of these tasks. I mean, you work through it, but that's part of the process for sure.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we've all used random kitchen tools to. I go out and I look for long-handled spoons, because they're great for stirring with. And scooping honey. Oh my God! Finding a spoon that's strong enough to scoop crystallized honey out of a dang bucket.
Oh, you know what?
I pitch cold. I've busted more spoons
stainless steel ladles.
Yeah, I know.
Stainless steel soup ladles.
Yes,
they're awesome for that.
But they bend after a while. They just bust. Metal fatigue.
Mine haven't.
I use a carbon steel carving knife.
There you go. I've done that too, where you just cut blocks of honey out and throw it in the bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like measuring butter by.
See, Evan, it's okay if it's crystallized. We don't care.
Yeah.
It's actually almost easier to measure. You don't get as much dripping when it's crystallized.
Yeah, that's true. Go ahead, Evan. Sorry.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that sentiment.
The other thing is you're using a bucket, so you can just sanitize your hand.
Yeah. I've done that, but
what's the how does it go as far as wildflower honey and mead making? Is that, I mean, obviously, if that's a tightly sourced wildflower honey, you can develop some consistency there. Is there pros and cons in that being a selection versus a specific varietal?
No, it depends on what you want. I mean, a lot of people like individual varietals because so many of them are very distinctive. Tupelo. If you have a Tupelo traditional, you'll always know what one tastes like because Tupelo has a very distinctive flavor. But wildflower honeys are great partly because they're, wildflower. So they're different depending on where you get. So like a North Dakota wildflower is completely different than a high desert wildflower, which is completely different than a southeastern wildflower, and depending on where in the southeast, a North Carolina wildflower is going to be different than a Louisiana wildflower, or a Texas wildflower. So
if you see a mead described as wildflower, it just means you'd be hoping to get some floral notes. You don't really know what you're going to get.
Could be anything,
if you're looking at a honey that's described as wildflower, you've just got to taste it and decide if you think it's what you want. And same goes with if you're trying to market it, you've got to look at it and just see what's in there and see what you think you've got. And if you're any good at making mead, you could make the mead first and then use that to help you write your notes and market it as well.
Yeah, true, because that gives you sort of a honey stripped down. Like when you fermented. When you fermented all the sweetness out of it, you get a much clearer taste for what the honey actually tastes like.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
It is. And the neat thing about wildflower, too, is depending on the characteristics of that particular wildflower source, you can then go on to build on that. Because, again, it's a recipe. So you get, I had a desert wildflower when I was out west. And it was a really distinctive flavor. There was a lot of smoky mesquite-like notes in it. Plus, there was just all the flowers that grow in the desert are completely different than what I see here in the southeast. So I was drinking a traditional made from this and going, oh wow, what if I built on this and made a mead with this, and this in it? So I started kind of like, what would it be if I, put some cardamom in there and maybe, some smoky peppers and, and I started playing with it and thinking how would I do that if I had some of this honey, which I don't. I can't seem to find any, but that's the thing is you look at that. That's why we're so keen on what does a honey taste like, because that's the core of everything we do. Is that core honey flavor comes through the mead no matter what you're doing. So what do you want to do with it? It doesn't have to be a traditional. It can it can be anything.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you call it. It matters what it tastes like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if the honey tastes good, the mead should taste good.
Yep. Oh yeah, you get out of it what you put into it for sure. That's why we pound so hard on honey quality.
Yeah.
Although there are times when the honey quality is not as important, like when you're making Joe's Ancient Orange, because the focus is going to be more on the orange and the cinnamon. And
the
you know, it's
raisins.
a good.
Don't forget the raisins. I like raisins.
Yeah, you know what? I actually
not as
quite
nutrients
recently...
though, because raisins are not nutrients, but they're lovely flavor components.
Don't even bring it up.
Yeah.
You know, I often forget the raisins, and I honestly can't taste the difference.
Yeah, well, they only put 10 raisins in it. You put a handful of them in there, it's a
25.
whole different story. Yeah.
I think it's 25
Is it
raisins,
25?
but
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
If you can count.
Yeah.
If you can count. Yeah. Oh, clove. Don't forget the clove.
Yeah, and the clove.
And the clove.
But yeah.
And maybe some nutmeg.
And maybe some nutmeg. Yeah, it just depends on
That's
what
not
you
in the recipe, though.
AJ, well, no, but AJ, you made like every possible variation of JL there is.
Doesn't the recipe say optional nutmeg? I thought it did.
I think it's set up. Yeah.
No.
I put allspice in it quite regularly. Yeah, I've broken the warranty on the Joe's Ancient Orange many times. I don't actually make it according to the recipe anymore. But for me, what makes it be a Joe's Ancient Orange is the 3.5 pounds of honey per gallon and bread yeast. And you have to have some form of acidity, because otherwise it turns out too sweet. So whatever fruit you're using, you have to have enough of it that it comes out with approximately the same acidity you're going to get from one orange.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how I go by Joe's Ancient Orange. And if you've used a different yeast, you may end up needing to back sweeten to get it to taste like what it's supposed to taste like. But it also may be that you like what you've created anyways. So.
Yeah, very true.
You know, if you like it, do it again.
Do it, yeah. And that's why notes are so important, because if you keep track of what you did, when you did it, and what it tasted like while you were doing it, and it helps to also, you know, just note, like in your case, Evan, if your basement's like mine, it stays at a more or less constant temperature year-round, regardless of how hot or cold it is outside. Evan?
Yeah, I would.
Thought we lost you.
Yeah. Well, I was contemplating the basement situation. I think it's somewhat constant. I'm interested to see what it feels like in July, but you're right. I think it's sufficient for what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, mine stays at somewhere between like 67 and 69-ish year-round, so it makes it a great place for me to stash mead. My entire wine collection is down there, you know. So yeah, I mean that's good. So if you note, you know, if you've got a place that has a regular sort of almost constant temperature, noting that is good, because you know if you ferment mead in your kitchen as opposed to your basement, you may get a different result depending on what yeast you're using, what the recipe is.
And what time of year?
And what time of year? Yeah, I made the mistake of doing a strawberry when the strawberries came out, which is around April here. And it was really wonderful until the temperature went from daily temps of like 45 or 50 to 90 plus literally overnight, and we didn't have the air on. So the house got really hot. And my strawberry burned completely dry in like 48 hours and was totally not what I wanted. So, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas if I ever want to use D47, I have to do it in the winter in the kitchen, because the basement is actually too warm for D47.
Mm-hmm.
And my kitchen, well, I haven't yet ever turned on the baseboard heater in the kitchen. So my kitchen is heated only by what comes off the stove and the refrigerator and the furnace, or the freezer.
Yeah.
Whereas the basement, the baseboard heaters are actually working in the basement, because that's where my husband retreats to.
That's where he plays his games.
That's where his computer is, therefore it's where he is.
Right, yeah. Yeah, Evan, part of the reason why temperature is important is, depending on the yeast, most yeasts have a temperature tolerance they like to stay within, so there's a range that they're happiest in. And if they get outside that range, and again, it's somewhat variable. None of this is set in stone. These are all like averages and guesstimates based on what the yeast manufacturers are telling us. But you get outside a certain range, and some of them are real sensitive to it, like, oh shoot.
Well, it's kind of like you know, on a 90 to 100 degree day, being asked to run 6 miles, you're not going to be very happy, and neither are the yeast, and they start sweating and spewing off weird flavors, and and smelling much like you would, and all
Everybody
that sort of
smells
stuff.
spirit when it's too hot.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and mead will do that. It'll throw weird off notes that can make your mead taste very strange, and sometimes letting it sit and age will fix that, and sometimes it won't.
And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it throws really nice flavors.
Sometimes it does, yes.
Yeah. And sometimes you'd get just weird flavors and tastes from fermentation. I've had a couple of batches that in the middle have tasted and smelled like vomit. And they tasted fine at the start, and they tasted fine at the end, but in the middle, it was pretty barfy. And I'm not sure why, but I had it happen with several batches of the same type, and it's just I'm kind of accepting that's kind of what happens with crab apples. They go barfy in the middle, and that's just the way it is.
Crab apples are weird.
Yeah, there's some sour notes, some lacto-y style notes that are coming off the yeast that are obviously blowing off later. I had a sour kiwi fruit beer the other day that smelt, and after the dirty socks, it just smelled like vomit, and I just couldn't drink that. It was Parmesan cheese is supplied descriptor.
Yeah, well, the one and only buckwheat that I ever made is traditional. No matter how long it aged, it still smelled like ancient, stiff sweat socks that could walk out of the room by themselves. It was just nasty.
Ew.
Yeah, I just never, no. And to this day, I rarely use buckwheat in a mead. I will, it's actually good to cook with and to put on toast, you know. It's actually kind of good with Vegemite. But, you know, I have not been able to kind of get it to where I like it in a mead yet. And that's Eastern buckwheat. Now, Western buckwheat's a whole different story.
And as flavor profiles go in mead, do you guys have a perception on, as some of these commercial meaderies kind of grow and are more well distributed and kind of find their own twists on presenting mead to maybe an otherwise uneducated population, like, do you have perception of what's working, what's a little more friendly to maybe a beer drinker's palate or a wine drinker's palate, in a traditional sense, as far as like what you see is going to continue to grow and expand versus maybe what is going to stay within the core mead making demographic as far as interest?
I think it's already spreading out. We're seeing more and more calls from magazines and newspapers and organizations who want to learn more, and that's really cool. Part of it, I had an interview with who was it? It was a newspaper in Hawaii that was featuring Nanny Moon Meadery, which is a Hawaiian meadery that makes a really awesome macadamia nut mead if you can ever get your hands on some. Anyway, she was
loving me a nut mead.
The what?
I love the nut meads. They're just
nut meads are awesome. Yeah, the macadamia, their macadamia honey mead is divine. Yeah, but anyway, so she was asking like, what did I think was driving this? The current awareness and expansion of mead, and I honestly think it's the young people. I mean, and not to sound like an old get off my lawn codger or anything, but being that I'm going to be 56 in 2 weeks, oh my god, I've been freaking out about this lately. Yeah, I'm just like, crap, how'd that happen? But seriously, I mean, what we're seeing both in the professional meaderies and in the incoming new mead makers is a lot of youngish people that are under the age of 30, and they're really super enthusiastic because it's something new, it's interesting, it's different, and mead has no boundaries. We don't have any real rules in terms of how from home perspective, you can make your mead any way you like, and a lot of times it's really good. Sometimes not so much, but that's part of cooking, is that sometimes it tastes like crap and you have to throw it out and try again, but I think that's part of the draw, is that it's, to them, it's new and cool and interesting and different, and it has, it's got, the sky's the limit. You can do almost anything you want with it.
Well, I think the fact that it's got no rules is probably what makes it so attractive.
Yeah.
Because if you happen to like dry white wines, you can have a dry traditional mead. If you happen to like big berry reds, you can have a big berry red mead. If you happen to like something that's beer strength or hopped, you can have a hopped session mead. You know, you can make it just about any way you can think of.
Yeah, I think that's good feedback, AJ. I actually consumed plenty of meads before I, attempted this first batch, i.e. across the past year or so, just in exploration. And I would say that having the background in honey, I gravitated towards something that, more mimic or more represented what I, associate with the taste of honey, something maybe semi-sweet, traditional, sticking out, and maybe a little bit away from something that would mimic something else, but I don't know. I think one of the trends that we see on our side, just from my perspective, is something a little more sessionable, being accessible to somebody who's used to a beer, or just maybe creates the right atmosphere and drinkability across an evening, as far as something a little bit lower and lighter than the opposite. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think that's part of it. Wine has if you look at the different major craft beverages, you've got wine, you got beer, you got mead, and then you got the distilled products. And the distilled products really all kind of happened because wine, beer, and cider. So, because they're basically distilled versions of those things when it gets right down to it. But for wine, it's had this sort of cachet for the longest time, where it's like wine. It's a lot of people saw wine drinkers as kind of snobby. It was like a hoity-toity thing. And what I ran into when doing some marketing research on wine versus mead was an awful lot of, I'm even afraid to define what I like by more than red or white, because they just were completely intimidated by all the rest of it, what kind of grape it was and what side of the vineyard it was and what year it was and all of that, and didn't know kind of where to go with it. And then mead comes on the scene, and it's kind of like the troublemaking younger brother, And
it's a gateway to everything.
It's a gateway to everything, yeah. And cider's much the same way. Cider's kind of the middle child. Wine is the big is the big one that's looking down on all of us, going, seriously? Oh my God, I can't believe you did that. And then cider came along, and beer's in there. Beer just kind of does what beer does, And beer's like mead; it can go in a lot of different directions. They don't have a whole lot more rules than we do, really. But and then cider is kind of the middle child, so it's out there and it's doing fun things, and now it's really starting to break out and do some really interesting variations that I'm just having all kinds of fun discovering. And but mead, shoot, it can be traditional. It can have peppers, it can have fruit, it can have vegetables, it can have spices, or any combination thereof. It's endless, literally. Okay.
Yeah.
Did I go off the air? I'm looking at my things going, I got really quiet there. Sorry.
That was a mic drop moment, per se.
Oh gosh. I don't get many of those. Yeah, but it is I've been watching this since it started, and it's been fun seeing it evolve. It's been really fun seeing it evolve. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the next 20 years of mead looks like, because we're kind of just hitting our stride. I really think this year and next year are pivotal years for the mead world, because so much is happening right now. It's just...
That's right, yeah.
Come on, it's like,
yeah.
Come on, guys, step in there. Please, don't leave me hanging. Tell me I'm full of shit, something. I don't know,
No, I think you're right. I don't disagree with you, Vicky. I don't think anyone has anything to detract from your statements. I think you're spot on.
Well,
you just covered the topic so well. We actually have nothing to say. There's nothing to add. Certainly nothing to distract.
I don't even know how to respond to that. Thank you. I don't know. I mean, you can tell I'm passionate about it. I mean, this is something I've been, a lot of my life has been taken up with mead over the last 20 some odd years, and it's a blast seeing this happen. It really is. So where do you see, I mean, where do you see you guys going forward, Evan, that, I mean, now you're kind of opening up to the idea that we're out there and we're another whole source of income, so to speak. Do you see them really opening up to that, to the possibilities of what mead makers can do to help Dutch Gold grow, and working with us to make that market fit?
Yeah. So I think the interest in the AMMA Conference and getting involved with the Mazer Cup as well, as far as that being a first endeavor, was kind of identifying that mead makers are going to be a demographic of folks that are all using honey in one way or another. Like inevitably by requirement, it's an opportunity. Not always the case when you go to different food oriented shows. You're not necessarily talking, in cases where somebody's not, either manufacturing a product or a retailer that is selling honey. So that was kind of the first identifier of like, okay, these are all potential customers, whether they're current customers or someone that you're trying to introduce to our offerings. There's plenty of folks out there, and I'm sure as big as Dutch Gold may be within the honey world. I'm sure there's plenty of folks that maybe geographically they have different suppliers, they have different that their world's slightly different, and Pennsylvania might be pretty distant. So that was kind of the first thought of maybe we try to step out and do something. We aren't overly, by the time you ship honey across the country, we're not overly saturated in the West Coast or even Midwest by any means. So just to see what kind of the interest level is, if it can open up, some introductions for us as far as, talking to folks and being a little more face to face than just, kind of hanging out in Central Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a learning process. I've gotten some positive feedback as far as response to the show, to the presentation and kind of meeting people through the trade show portion of the conference, and kind of can take that back and put a few things on paper that helps some of the decision makers in Lancaster understand and see the opportunity and see the potential. So it's again, it's still a balance game for us. We appreciate the kind of business. It's a much more personal type of business. Unfortunately, we do have to kind of, to some degree cater and service what's going to make the numbers work for us in a lot of respects. But I think having a new, 3 or 4 varietals within the last few years that, always looking for opportunity for exposure for those items. It seems like a good point to kind of drum up some interest and, gain some opportunities to get those out and known that we're carrying them and they're available. So as best as we can, we're, continue to offer opportunities to the industry and, kind of make it work for both parties. I know there's interest from the community for us to do things more in line with what media makers are looking for. And I think as much as we can make that work for us, we can kind of work together to continue to, build and grow as the meat industry grows up and expands, and as as we continue kind of in our varietal endeavor in what we have to offer.
Well, and not just varietals, really. I mean, the varietals are great, and we do love varietals. But at the same time, sometimes what you're looking for is a more a muted honey, I guess you'd say. A good quality, good flavor honey, but not necessarily one that stands out. Like, for instance, I'm not going to take and make a melomel, a fruit mead, out of a Tupelo because, well, that would probably anger the Tupelo gods, and then I'd never get any more ever again. But Tupelo is a very individualistic honey, so it's just a shame to cover that up. On the other hand, though, I love a really solid wildflower because I can do anything with that. The possibilities are absolutely endless depending on the flavor profile that it's got. So it's, just your varietals, yes, are great, but your other honeys, especially since you have a commitment to quality, are also a desirable thing. And you're looking at 400 plus meaderies nationwide, over 200 of them east of the Mississippi, and I don't even know how many tens of thousands of mead makers. There's over 10,000 members in the mead makers group, or in the modern mead making group, and there's 4,000 in the Got Mead group, and and those are just the ones that found us.
But yeah, you're not going to want to use a high menthol honey with an apple cider or something like that. But you might if you're making a Meadito or whatever they call it, where they put mint and stuff in there. It'd actually complement rather well. So if you really need to pick your honey for your mead, and you also need to pick your the right fruit or addition to go with it. And make sure they're not going to clash, and that if it's a standout, that it's a complementary standout. And that's why a lot of people prefer the wildflower honey, for the blending, like you say, for the melomels, like you say.
It's a great foundational honey. It lends a lovely honey character, but it really lets you stand out the ingredients that you want to showcase. So. I've seen good wildflowers paired with a lot of the capsicumels and spice meats, particularly because when I'm doing a methiglen, I'm not really looking to showcase the honey so much as I'm looking for an interesting balance between the honey and the spice blend that I'm working with.
Right.
So again, it's just, if people stop and look at it, it's just food. It's a food recipe. You have to look at, do the flavors come together the way they're supposed to, the way you want them to. But yeah, we could go on and on and on about this, forever and a day. But yeah, Evan, I hope you've enjoyed being on the show. We've certainly enjoyed having you here.
I appreciate it. You've both give me a kind of opportunity to share some knowledge about Dutch Gold and what we have going on, as well as gave me some knowledge on how to have a great experience with my first batch of mead. So I do appreciate it, and thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, thanks for coming on the
You're
show.
welcome.
And hook into either the Got Mead forum or one of the mead making groups. We've got a Got Mead group, Modern Mead Making, on Facebook if you're active on Facebook, and don't be afraid to ask questions. That's why the groups are there. Somebody gives you any crap, let me know and I'll beat them up for you.
I have swords.
Yeah, she does. So yeah, but particular Got Mead, I do not allow people to browbeat anybody or they get booted. Period. End of story. And I don't take any crap off anybody for that. I don't like that kind of behavior, so I don't allow it. But seriously, that's what we're there to learn together.
Excellent. I appreciate the support.
Yeah, no worries. I can't wait to hear. You're going to have to keep me in the loop now and let me know what happens with this mead, right? Okay, please?
Absolutely. I'll give you that commitment for sure.
Thanks, Evan. I appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys are going to be doing, and I'll stay in touch because, there's going to be some other things that I'm sure we can put together that will let you guys get your mead out to more, or your honey out to more people.
That sounds like a plan.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on Got Mead.
Absolutely. You guys have a good night, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Evan.
Cheers, mate.
Take care.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. That was fun. You know, we
Upcoming events.
Oh yeah, upcoming events. We got a lot actually this week. Okay, April 13th, Groenfell Meadery is doing the Fancy Schmancy Cocktail Party with Silo Distillery, which they're doing some cocktail stuff, which is going to be really interesting. Starlight Meadery on April 14th, 7th Annual Festival of Legends. Also on April 14th, St. Ambrose Cellars has got Saudade coming over to play music at their place. Yeah. I hope they're going to have music when I'm there this summer. I can't wait because they're just 20 minutes from where my parents live. So I'm planning on spending like a lot of evenings up there. April 14th again, Boss Meadery in Wisconsin, Gold Dust Women is going to be playing at their place. They do a comedy night like every month, which I think is really cool. If I get to Wisconsin, I'm totally going to go to that. April 15th, Threadbare Meat and Cider is having the Hawk Brunch to raise money for animal rescue. So they've actually got rescue hawks coming to like this brunch that they're having with me. That's really neat.
Oh, that's cool.
That's so a really busy weekend.
Yeah, it is a really busy weekend. This is all over the country. This like Starlight's in North Carolina, St. Ambrose is in Michigan, Boss is in Wisconsin, and I don't remember where Threadbare is. I think they're up north somewhere. And then April 21st is the Winemakers Shop Mead competition. And all of these are linked on the page, so y'all can, go pick up the links there. April 24th, my birthday, Boss Meadery is doing a mead pairing dinner. I can't believe they're doing it on my birthday. How rude. How could they? All the way up in Wisconsin, and I won't be able to go. It's so sad. April 29th, Brothers Drake has the Waffle Palooza. Don't ask, just go to the website, to the show page, click the link. It's really cool. And then May 5th is Bee Nectar Spring Fest. If you have not been to a Bee Nectar Spring Fest, you really want to go to a Bee Nectar Spring Fest. And that's in Michigan as well. So, and of course, meaderies, those of you out there that actually listen to this, which apparently there aren't any because I never get any emails, if you want your event on Got Mead, we will be happy to announce it here, but you have to tell us about it. So,
stop making us chase you down.
Thank you. So Got Mead at gotmead.com. Tell me about your events. I'll feature them on the show. Thank you very much. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you. I'm working on getting a couple more honey people for the next couple of weeks. I'm having conversations with a couple of the honey providers that were at the AMMA Conference. So we're hopefully going to have them next week and the week after. We're also working on putting together a kind of a meetup with Raphael from Enlightenment Mead in New York, who makes meads that make really good cocktails. He's got I think it's his brother who's a master cocktail maker, which is kind of cool. And then another lady who is also a New Yorker that I got to get her contact info from, Bobby, that we're going to have the two of them on the show together. She makes a miso cider, so this is like battle of the interesting fermentation techniques. I think it'll be really cool to hear the conversation that comes out of all of that. So I'm working on pulling that together. I don't know who's going to be on what dates yet, but I'll let you guys know as soon as I know.
Sounds like we got some weirder than weirdo coming up.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to branch out into some interesting stuff, and we can only hear from so many meaderies before it gets kind of boring, so let's try something different here. You make mead, great, that's wonderful. So what else do you do? But I also want to explore some of the fringes of fermentation, and some of the interesting things that can be done that maybe people haven't thought of. So, those of you out there that are listening to the show, either live or in recording, if there's somebody you think we need to talk to or a subject that you think we need to pursue, you need to let us know. Gotmead at gotmead.com, because we want to hear. We can't think of everything. We're only human. Well, kind of. But,
awesome, but human,
Yeah, awesome, but human. So, yeah, but, seriously, we want to know what you think. What do you want to hear? And this is your show, too. So let us know what you want. Gotmead at gotmead.com, and tell us what you want to hear about so that we can, we can get it on the show. We'll hunt them down. And if you've got particular people, just let us know and hook us up. Connect us, and we'll make the conversation happen. So that's all I got. What about you guys? Got any cool stuff coming up in Oz? Hamish?
We've just started the committee meetings for this year's show, so there will be some stuff coming up. There's also going to be another Victorian meet come October, I think, around the same time as the Australian Homebrew Festival. So, yeah, I'll keep you all posted and watch this space.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, we still got to firm up the dates on the trip to Australia and make that figure that one out. But
that's true.
Yes, indeed. All right, guys. So then we will say bye, and we'll see you guys same bat time, same bat channel next week.
Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Night, John Boy.
Good night, Vicky.
Yeah. All right, y'all. See you later.